The U.S. Supreme Court upholding a Biden administration regulation that seeks to crack down on so-called ghost guns. The weapons are extremely difficult to trace by police because they are assembled individually through purchasing separate parts. So the rule requires serial numbers, background checks, and age verification for those trying to buy kits online to assemble the guns. 7 justices voted to uphold the rule, with Republican Justices Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito dissenting. Chief Legal Analyst Clive Rhodes joining us here to talk about this. I mean, this is a big deal. So their reasoning, though, to keep this in place. Explain that so we can understand.
Well, the question that Gorsuch, who authored this opinion, talked about, and it was a 7-2 majority, he says that, listen, it's still a firearm.
Right.
Specifically because this is quick. He looked at the name. He said these are buy, build, and shoot. I mean, that's in the title of the purchase of the firearm that you're trying to, or the piece that you're getting. Buy, build, shoot. He said that quickness, because it was something that could be readily, easily, within 30 minutes, shipped, created, put in your hand, built, and now shooting. He determined that that was a firearm. 7-2 majority of the court agreed with that rationale, that obviously Congress has given the ATF the authority to authorize, regulate firearms. So that's not the question. The question is, are these ghost guns firearms? His answer is yes. If they're firearms, they can be regulated. This administration, or should I say the last administration, the Biden administration, having the authority to do this was something that was within their authority.
So is this a case of prioritizing public safety over a constitutional amendment?
I'm not sure. What I think really this a couple things. The Trump administration has already talked about government overreach. They've already talked about the overreach of these agencies having the ability to do stuff. So if you were an agency, even within the last administration, the ATF, the FCC, anyone that's doing any type of regulatory authority rulemaking process, the government has attempted to roll back that authority. This administration is going to do it in overdrive. And so what you're now saying is, do they have the authority to do this? Has Congress authorized them to do this? And this court has said, yes, they are, specifically because these things are not something that's separate from the firearm. It is a firearm. And if Congress has given the ATF authority to regulate and promulgate rules on firearms, then they're within their congressional authority. Open and shut case in the eyes of the 7-2 majority of the court.
But I think a lot of people out there are wondering, so how does this differ from the recent rulings, though, expanding on Second Amendment rights?
I don't think it's different. I just think this is a nuanced issue. The first nuanced issue is this. You have folks that are saying, law enforcement, that we're seeing these ghost guns pop up at an alarming rate. Started rather low, then had an enormous increase in usage. And they were petitioning jurisdictions to try to find ways to make sure that these guns are not popping up. So what do? You got to have background checks. You got to have serial numbers. You got to have things to make sure that it's treated like any other firearm, because it wasn't. This was something that folks were able to print the lower. That's the bottom portion of the firearm, and then you can go and piece together your own portion. Well, they're saying, well, it's not a firearm. And there was no rule. There was no regulation. So then the ATF comes out and says, you know what? These little bottom lowers that you guys are printing, that you're sending off to folks, they are considered firearms. And it went through the traditional rulemaking process. There was a time for people to have public input. There was a response time frame for them to take impact and see if this is a rule that should be implemented. And then ATF went ahead and implemented during the Biden administration. So I think this is something where this was technology meeting the law kind of in real time, where typically the law takes 20, 30 years to catch up with technology. This is something, I think, because you had the law enforcement piece saying we needed some protections now, not tomorrow, not in the future, but instantly.
Just because this is so controversial, I just want to make sure, is there anything that I missed, anything you want to be able to add that people need to be aware about?
I think you got a couple things. I mean, I always like looking at these cases and looking at the dissent. So you had 2 dissenters. You had Thomas at the Senate, and you had Alito. Alito dissented more based on procedural process. Alito was saying that you guys didn't even apply the right test, that the test that was used in this case was not the right test and it should have been a different test. I don't agree with that process. I think the test was the accurate test. The one that I take issue with the most probably is Clarence Thomas's dissent. Clarence Thomas is saying that you guys have now allowed government overreach, that he says that if Congress wanted them to, the ATF, to authorize these things that could be built or readily converted into a firearm, they would have authorized to do that. And if they didn't authorize them to do that, they as in Congress, then they don't have the right to create rules around things that are not firearms from the very beginning. So something that's created, that's readily converted, he thinks that they have overstepped and went outside of their reach. His was totally different than the dissent of Alito, but he did not agree with the majority at all.
Very good insight. Collie Froze, we appreciate it as always. Thank you so much.